I grew up in Virginia, born at the Danville Hospital, but we lived out in the county. We lived in a little community called Spring Garden. It was about the size of my living room, very small. Lived with my mom, my dad, my brother. Went through a bunch of failed relationships because I was not seeking God's will for my life. I was just making my own decisions, and that never turned out very well. But finally I met Stephen. Well, we went to high school together, but we didn't connect in high school. We weren't friends in high school. I just knew him from high school. It was the Saturday before Mother's Day he asked me to marry him. So of course I said yes. Beautiful ceremony, just best day of my life. Best day of my life ever. I got married in September. The very following November is when I was diagnosed with diabetes. Went to the doctor for some other issues, thought it might be my thyroid, and they, of course, checked my sugar and everything. And I actually saw when the doctor was scrolling through the computer, they had checked my A1C and it was 8.3. And the beginning of diabetes is 6, and I just cried. The worst part I think about it is when I was talking to people, I would say, at least I don't have cancer. We were just trying to figure out if we had kids, what would we do about grandparents and support system, and we thought that possibly it would be better out here. And everything is so different here. And then the bottom falls out. Stephen got his insurance in November, so I went to the doctor to establish care for my diabetes. I have had the cyst in my breast for years. I'm talking probably since I was in my 20s. And I've had it checked out periodically back in Virginia, and I was told it was a fibroid cyst, very common in women my age, nothing to worry about. And I wholeheartedly believe that's what it was. My dad had a brain tumor for like 17 years that was benign, that all of a sudden became cancer. So I knew that there was stuff that could be in our bodies that could be perfectly fine, and then all of a sudden not fine. So I went to the doctor and we did the diabetes thing, and she checked it out and she scheduled me for a mammogram, which is something I've never had before. I've always had ultrasounds. So I went in for the mammogram, and the tech told me that the doctor would most likely want to do an ultrasound. I was like, fine, that's perfectly fine. I've had a million of them. So she does the ultrasound, and she tells me that she wants to do a biopsy. That was a little scary in itself, because no one ever said before they wanted to do a biopsy. And she took the sample, and she told me right there that she was expecting it to be cancer. So the very next day she calls and says the biopsy came back and it was like I expected, it's cancer. It wasn't why me, it was why here. Why away from all my family and all my friends? Why now? I didn't want to go through what I needed to go through to fight it. I didn't want to lose my hair. I didn't want to go through chemo. After the biopsy, I met with my surgeon, because we were expecting surgery, full mastectomy. And she explained to me the HER2. She said, it's great. We can do the targeted therapies. You're HER2 positive. What she didn't tell me was HER2 positive was a very aggressive form of cancer. I had to have a CAT scan and a PET scan. So the very first time I meet my oncologist, he meets me, he comes in, he introduces himself, and he says, do you know the results of your PET scan? No one's told me anything. He said, I got bad news. I didn't know what it was. I just immediately broke down. I didn't know what he was going to tell me, but how do you get any worse than cancer? And He told me that they had found some spots in my liver and that they were pretty confident that it was cancer. And so at that moment, I knew what that meant. I knew that that was stage 4 cancer. I knew that that was terminal. And after what some stuff my dad went through, I honestly felt like I had been told I was gonna die. They told me that there would no longer be surgery because it's not gonna change my prognosis. And at this point, treatment is revolved around quality of life. My husband was with me. All I could think of was it hasn't been enough time. We had just celebrated our first year of marriage in September, and this was happening in December. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to act. I mean, no one specifically said you have X amount of time, but it didn't matter. I mean, it still felt like they were telling me you're going to die. There were women in the church I grew up in. It didn't matter what came their way. They were rocks, you know, and people would even say, she'll be okay. She's got great faith. And it wasn't too long ago that I prayed, God, let me be one of those women that has this great faith. Not understanding, in order to have that great faith, you gotta go through something pretty bad. When I accepted the fact that I had not only to fight this, but I also had to embrace it as part of what God wanted for my life, it completely changed the way I looked at this diagnosis. It went from a death sentence to a life sentence, where I could say, okay, let's just go worst case scenario. I have 18 to 34 months. Let's make the most of it. You know, I don't want to be in the bed crying when I can be living my life and loving my husband and loving my family. And something inside me for the first time ever wanted to be close to God instead of running away from Him. For the first time, I needed it. I needed God. This diagnosis has caused me to trust in God more than I've ever trusted before. It's caused me to surrender. You know, at one point, I remember, I don't know where it was in this whole process, but I remember praying and saying, okay, God, I give it to you. I give you my cancer. I give you my life. I give you my time here. I give you everything. I don't want to control it. You control it. And it's really weird because all my life I've heard, you know, peace that surpasses all understanding. And I've never experienced it until now. Because I don't understand how I can be at peace with a terminal diagnosis. I might live 15 years, 20 years, but I'm still considered to have terminal illness. This is not a cancer that, medically speaking, is curable. It's treatable. You know, I'll be on treatment forever. How can you be at peace with that? But I guess knowing because God's in control, and before my mom and daddy ever thought about me, God knew how much time I was going to have and exactly what day I was going to leave this earth, and nothing from the time I've been born to the time I do die is going to change that. My prayer when I found out I had stage 4 cancer was never for God to heal me. I know that sounds crazy. You know, that's probably where most people go. My prayer was time. Just let me have time. Let me grow old with my husband. I don't care if I walk around with this cancer for 20 more years. Just let me have time. Because I know I'm going to be healed. I know it. Whether it's on this earth or God taking me home,